see some brightness first thing, but that rain will arrive later on in the day. Across Northern Ireland, some showery rain, but it's not expected to be as heavy as it has been through today. But it's across parts of North Wales, the Midlands, northeastern England in particular, where the rain will be the heaviest first thing. And that will continue to persist throughout the day. So as the day goes on, I think any impacts from the rain will become more likely as more weather warnings come into force. As that rain pushes up into Scotland, we've got another weather warning in force for Scotland. We could see up to 100 millimetres, perhaps more, fall over the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday, particularly across parts of North Wales into northern areas of England. So that could bring some major travel disruption, and temperatures are going to be disappointing for the time of year with plenty of cloud around. Rain continues into Thursday, particularly across the north and west. It's this north area of Wales where there's the most potential for some disruptive heavy rain, but it will turn more showery as the day goes on. And across the south, it will start to turn a little bit brighter by the afternoon. A mix of showers as we head towards Friday, and by Saturday, a chance of some sunshine and temperatures climbing towards 20 degrees.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not a line, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. You will not believe what the pro-Palestine lot have done now, and
just urge the Prime Minister to act and to begin to rebuild some of the lost trust and confidence of the public.
You have just been betrayed again on immigration. Plus,
concludes that the UK and all parties to the Rome Statute have a legal obligation to comply with orders and warrants issued by the court.
A Labour government would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu and make Israel our enemy. Madness. And
indeed, what we've just seen in the last few weeks is 15 EU countries actually all making the same point, that that's what this requires. That's why our Rwanda scheme is so important.
the Europeans are going to copy Rwanda, a blow for Remainers everywhere. Also, we've got the solution to get grooming gang monsters out of Britain. Plus, the flight from hell. I show you the aftermath of the Singapore Airlines turbulence that cost a Brit his life. I've got all of tomorrow's newspapers tonight with my top panel of columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, Tory Deputy Chairman Jonathan Gullis and author Amy Nicole Turner. Oh, and you will never guess what happens next. Get ready, Britain, here we go. Get the grooming gangs out of Britain. Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A 73-year-old British man has died after an aircraft was hit by severe turbulence on a flight from London Heathrow to Singapore. The plane was forced to make an emergency landing in Bangkok. Airport officials believe the man may have suffered a heart attack. More than 50 people were hurt, 7 of them critically, after sustaining head injuries. Singapore Airlines confirmed there were 18 crew and 211 passengers on board. 47 were from the UK. The Prime Minister has addressed the issue of illegal migration during a visit to Austria. Rishi Sunak says EU countries are starting to recognise places like Rwanda are essential in tackling the problem, with 15 states calling on the European Commission to tighten migration policy. Speaking exclusively to GB News, the Prime Minister says the numbers prove progress is being made in stopping small boats and thousands of illegal migrants are being returned to other countries.
The numbers are down by around a third. They were down by around a third last calendar year as well. So we are making progress. And just this year, in fact, we have returned 10,000 people back to other countries. That's 2,000 people more than we did last year. So that shows the progress we're making. And including within that are 1,700 foreign national offenders. Again, 400 more than last year. So yes, we are making progress. Of course, there's more to do. I've been very clear that I won't stop until we have stopped the boats.
In other news, a former Royal Marine accused of spying for the Hong Kong Intelligence Service has died in unexplained circumstances in a park in Berkshire. 37-year-old Matthew Trickett was charged with offences under the National Security Act earlier this month. Police officers were called to Grenfell Park in Maidenhead at around 5:15 p.m. on Sunday. In a statement, Mr Trickett's family have asked for privacy while they mourn his death. And a Conservative MP has spoken to GB News about his battle with sepsis, admitting he's extremely lucky to be alive. Craig McKinley is returning to Parliament for the first time tomorrow after suffering a life-threatening episode of sepsis in September, which led to the amputation of his hands and feet. The MP for South Thanet has spoken out about his road to recovery and how it impacted him. Now he wants to be known as the first bionic MP.
Everything was starting to shut down. It was quite serious, and my wife was told that they'd very rarely see people of this amount of illness in the hospital and perhaps prepare for the worst. Maybe they could have saved a bit of a foot, but my surgeon said you are better off having them off because you can have prosthetics and you'll walk far better than having a partial foot. I'm hoping people might give me the benefit of the doubt and say that man's been a fighter for himself. He's damn well going to fight for me. I'm going to give him my support.
The bionic MP.
Bionic MP is what I want to be.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick.
Britain's grooming gang shame is a lesson in what can happen when people are too afraid of being called racist to do something about a problem. The vulnerable working-class white girls of Newcastle, Rotherham, Rochdale, Keighley, Aylesbury, Oxford, Peterborough and Telford know only too well about how police and politicians sacrifice them at the altar of political correctness. In the vast majority of cases, the perpetrators were overwhelmingly a combination of depraved monsters from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladeshi origin. Numerous reports, like the one into the Telford scandal that saw more than 1,000 girls tortured, raped and abused, have said that fears of being labelled a racist prevented authorities from acting. But after coming under huge pressure from GB News and a few other voices as well, the government set up a grooming gang task force. And now the results are in. The Home Office said that the task force has trained hundreds of specialist officers to investigate child sexual exploitation, who have worked with all 42 police forces in England and Wales, generating some 550 arrests and protecting around 4,000 victims. This is good news. However, I have serious reservations about this. Has it dealt with the root cause? Has it done anything to change the mindset of people within certain communities who feel as though they can treat vulnerable working-class white girls like pieces of meat? Is there any evidence at all to suggest that the fear of being called a racist for pointing out a clear and obvious problem has gone away? Do you, the public, have confidence that this problem has actually gone away? I certainly don't. And I have huge concerns that we might be importing people from countries where their attitudes towards young women are vastly different, and that this problem is actually going to get worse. I also have no confidence in the establishment media, that they are any more likely to call this problem out, to investigate it. I will never forget that the BBC barely reported on the Telford grooming gang scandal, and also they did some unholy PR work for two Syrian asylum seeker brothers who went on to commit horrific attacks in Newcastle. But more than that, we are not doing everything that we can to get convicted grooming gang monsters out of the country. Take the case of the Rochdale groomers Adil Khan and Qari Abdul Rauf, who have managed to rack up millions of pounds in legal aid, reportedly, who are scheduled for deportation. They were years ago, and are still prowling the streets. They are of dual Pakistani and British heritage, and Pakistan is refusing to take them back. Well, we should be forcing Pakistan to take them and others like them. And we can. The Nationality and Borders Act introduced a power to impose visa penalties on countries that do not cooperate on the removal of its nationals who do not have a right to be in the UK. Now, last year, we issued, apparently, 55,000 visas to Pakistan. We also gave millions in foreign aid and billions were sent back in remittances. So, it's time to start throwing our weight around, isn't it? Something that our reporter, Charlie Peters, put directly to Safeguarding Minister Lorda Farris.
I'd have to look into the details of which people they haven't accepted as returns, but it is a principle of our domestic law that if a person has a sentence of 2 years or longer and they're not a British national, they qualify for automatic deportation following the conclusion of their sentence. So the deportation of foreign national offenders is embedded in our law. And from what you're saying, although I don't know the exact detail, yes, it sounds sensible.
It sounds sensible. That's actually quite a big development, really, but it begs the question, why on earth aren't we doing this? Slash the visas, slash the foreign aid, slash the remittances, get these monsters off our street and out of our country. But let's get the thoughts of my panel. This evening I am joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I've got Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis, and author Amy Nicole Turner. Jonathan, I'll start with you. Should we be looking at sanctioning some of these countries, cutting down on visa applications and foreign aid if they refuse to take these monsters back?
Well, you know me, Patrick. I like the old deport stamp to come out, and deport is the way to go forward. And I think Laura Farris there made a very good case that the government is now going to look at the fantastic suggestions and using the powers, as you rightly point out, are part of the Nationality and Borders Act, to make it very clear to countries like Pakistan that there will be an implementation on visas. I certainly believe with foreign aid as well that we should be using that power that we have in order that financial weight that we can give to other countries to say that that comes with certain expectations and certain demands, just like any other country would. China, we know, is using it in more of a soft power element and saying that we'll build you factories, but you must hire Chinese workers or use Chinese technology. We should be saying to these countries that simply, if you want some of our money, our taxpayers' hard-earned money, then ultimately you've got to pay a consequence as well, which is we want these criminal scum out of our country once and for all.
Amy, police were too afraid of being called racist to act in many cases. Does that have to stop now?
Yeah, that definitely played a massive part of this, but it oversimplifies it. So another massive thread was that the girls, the vulnerable girls, were not believed because of their standing in society. So they were victim blamed. At one point, the police actually arrested one of these 14-year-old girls. And talking about the victims, I think that's who really all of us would agree need help now. And what has the government done so far? Well, they've given £12 million a year set aside for victim support services, which equals about £48 per victim per year. That doesn't even scratch the surface. So there are women, young women, who have had pregnancies, who have had abortions, who are not getting the help that they deserve and are funding their own therapy because of this. I think there's plenty more that we can do for the victims.
No, there are. No, absolutely, 100%, and that is something that definitely needs to be highlighted, and you're absolutely right to do so. Esther, do we need to do more to get these people out of the country, throw our weight around a little bit on the world stage?
Yeah, obviously. But I think on the point of the two guys that you mentioned, I think they had dual citizenship.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know if their British citizenship was revoked, because if that's the case, then obviously that makes it easier to deport them. So I think that might be the technicality that the journalist presented. That would have been an issue. But of course, we have over, I think, 11,000 foreign national offenders now serving, I think, sentences of about 2,000 years between them that cannot be deported because, you know, there's a bevy of human rights lawyers and the charity industrial complex that's preventing them from being deported. Many of the arguments they're saying is that they were born in this country, but at the end of the day, if they don't have a right to be in the country, they should be deported because they are criminals. I think particularly on the Rochdale grooming gangs and the grooming gangs in general, it's kind of like a Swiss cheese. It's been a fundamental failure on all levels, all societal protection levels. There's been a failure of families to protect these young people, of the communities to actually, you know, insulate them from these monsters. But also, you know, the police obviously failed massively, and the social pressure that they face to not want to be labelled racist. So I don't think it's something that the government can solve because it's multi-layered. But the first question is, where are these kids' families? Where are these young women's fathers and brothers and cousins?
But a lot of them were in children's services. A lot of them were in care. A lot of them were looked after children.
There's a reason why, particularly in the Rochdale grooming gang, which is obviously was overrepresented by British Pakistanis. You know, there's a reason why they weren't going after other British Pakistani girls, because they had the protections of their own families. They saw white British vulnerable girls and decided to use them as basically, you know, bags of meat. And that's something we should be talking about, the breakdown of the family structure, of the community, of the failure of the police to protect these girls. It's not something that the government can fix by itself. It's a societal issue.
The government could help by funding children's services more adequately.
But the thing is,
social workers have about 30 kids on,
okay, yes, but you have a child in your home. You would know if
not going to be able
you're a mother, you have a child in your home. You would know if your child was missing or there was something going on. A lot of these girls, that basic protection, that basic safety net was not there. But what is the government supposed to do there?
But my point is, this is a theme across all child abuse. Like, if we want to actually help children who are victims of this type of exploitation, look at the theme. And what's the theme? Is power imbalances and not being believed, such as the Jimmy Savile victims. Same thing. The police didn't believe them.
Yes, that is. But Jonathan, a lot of people will be scratching their heads and demanding to know why on earth the government accepted 55,000 visas from Pakistan last year. We're giving them millions in foreign aid and all of this stuff, and they are refusing in their basic duty to take back a couple of these monsters. I understand they might not want them, but we've got to force them, haven't we?
Well, let's be fair, Patrick. At the end of the day, the Prime Minister introduced a task force, and James Cleverly today, as the Home Secretary, has actually announced the task force has been working. We've seen, over 550 arrests in total, 4,000 victims potentially now, saved in that essence. And look, with regards to Pakistan, that's state-to-state level negotiation. That's our Foreign Office as well as our Home Office, and of course, even in number 10, speaking with leadership over there. And look, the Prime Minister is willing to do that. He's already had some very tough discussions and made some very tough decisions related to legal migration so far.
Well, would you back sanctions, though?
Absolutely. I fully back using all powers at our disposal to make it abundantly clear that if you have dual citizenship, as we did with others, who went over to Syria to commit atrocities fighting for ISIS, they lost their British passports. The same should be happening with these monsters as well.
You cannot say that would save the victims. They were failed then, and they're being failed now.
Well, I mean, I think it's common sense to say that foreign national offenders should not be allowed to stay in the UK, but we still know that 67% of all criminal gang members that are grooming these children are not of British Asian descent. They're white British people. What is the government supposed to do about that, right? You can't deport, native Brits. What's going to happen?
No, so look, that's where we need to obviously have. So that's where, of course, Amy touched on a fair point, which is about the victim support and how we improve. And I fully agree with you. For too long, it's been unfashionable to talk about the importance of family in this country, and too many politicians haven't focused on that. And I think Miriam Cates is one of those who's been exceptional in that particular regard.
Sex education for under 9, which would lead directly to more child abuse.
No.
Because children are exploited when they can't explain their bodies and when they can't talk about what healthy relationship looks like.
She wanted age appropriate, which is entirely the right thing to do.
But nothing before the age of 9.
Why is everything? What I find very frustrating is that everything somehow is on the roll of the state. I think Esther made a very good point. I, as a parent of a girl and a boy, is my responsibility to make sure that my children are well looked after, that I protect them day in, day out, that I know their whereabouts, I know the individuals they're hanging around. The state cannot and should not always be seen as the stopgap in order to try and help out, sadly, what is bad parents.
So what about
the state
the children
does,
that do have bad parents?
Also, there is a case to be made about parental rights, and the state's encroachment on people actually wanting to raise their children with certain values you cannot destroy that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If you're talking about, you know, sex education with young people, parents have a right to still teach their children the values that they believe are important.
They do, but can I also just round off with a question on this, which is I actually don't think enough is spoken about, in my view, the real racism that took place here, which is that a lot of members of these, in the cases that we're talking about here, Pakistani grooming gangs, looked at vulnerable young working-class white girls and saw them as lesser than.
But that's
Patrick,
exactly...
you must give credit to
that but the police saw them like that, the social services saw them like that, they saw them as lesser than, and that's the theme of this whole thing. Those girls were ignored and they were put to one side by every...
And to be fair, we must remember, Sajid Javid was incredibly brave when he came forward, when he was Home Secretary, to call out these British Pakistani grooming gangs, which obviously was very dangerous for him to do. We had an awful lot of death threats that came in. Obviously, a lot of people were very racist towards him in what he called out. So I think he deserves full respect for actually taking the brave and bold steps.
All right, guys, look, we've covered a lot there. It's a really lively start. I know it's going to get our viewers going as well, so make sure that you get your views coming in, OK? It's gbnews.com/your say. Now, I've got a heck of a lot coming your way, including a bizarre development today, which appears that now a Labour government would actually want to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. What on earth does that mean for Britain's allies on the world stage? But before all of that, in yet another classic and vintage handbrake turn, it's the Great British Giveaway. Your chance to win £20,000 in cash in time for summer. What would you spend it on? A dream holiday, get the garden done, or perhaps treat the family? Well, you have to hurry as time is ticking on your chance to make it yours. Here's how.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, it's revealed that 24,000 super-sized families with more than 13 kids are costing the taxpayer a whopping £150 million in child benefits claims. Should a limit be introduced on child benefits payments? Lee Anderson hits out on Benefits Britain and has his say on a push for British workers for British jobs. That's shortly. Plus, sheer terror at 37,000 feet. I'll show you the chilling aftermath of that Singapore Airlines turbulence that tragically cost a British man his life. Absolutely shocking stuff. Everyone's worst nightmare, that, isn't it? But up next, is Labour wrong to back the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu? Former spokesperson for the Israeli government, Elon Levy, goes head-to-head with ex-Labour speechwriter James Matthewson. That'll be box office. Don't miss it.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Coming up, are supersized families with 13 kids fleecing the child benefit system? Reform UK MP Lee Anderson is live in the studio next. But now, is Labour wrong to back the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu? It's time for the head-to-head. Yeah, astonishing development this. So the International Criminal Court sparked outrage yesterday after requesting an arrest warrant for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with both Rishi Sunak and the US President Joe Biden slamming that decision. The ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, announced yesterday that he'd applied for arrest warrants for Netanyahu, the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, as well as the leaders of Hamas on suspicion of war crimes. A decision on whether to issue an arrest warrant will now be made by ICC judges, so we have to wait and see what happens there. But Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, was quick out the traps to give the International Court his unequivocal backing.
Labour's position is that the decision by the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor to apply for arrest warrants is an independent matter for the court and the prosecutor. And Labour believes that the UK and all parties to the Rome Statute have a legal obligation to comply with orders and warrants issued by the court.
So, if Labour supports the arrest of the Israeli leader, then surely a Labour government would also stop arming and start divesting from Israel entirely. thus upending decades and decades of British foreign policy. And that comes just one day after Starmer's party committed to making it easier to change gender by requiring just a single medical professional to sign off on a gender recognition certificate. So it does look a lot like a vote for Labour might be a vote for more blokes in women's changing rooms and a vote as well to divest from Israel. So is Labour wrong to back the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu? Going head-to-head on this are the former Israeli government spokesperson Elon Levy and former Labour speechwriter James Matthewson. Thank you very, very much. Elon, this seems like a remarkable decision. A Labour government appears to want to make an enemy of Israel.
Yeah, it's a frankly appalling way to treat an ally, an outrageous lack of backbone in the face of a brutal terror organisation. I think that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was completely right when he said you simply cannot compare a democratic state fighting a barbaric terror organisation and that terror organisation. Israel is fighting to prevent another October 7th massacre. Hamas is fighting to perpetrate another October 7th massacre. It's as simple as that. Israel is fighting to bring back the hostages who are being tortured in those terror dungeons, and it's doing it in fiendishly difficult circumstances with Hamas embedded inside and underneath civilian facilities, taking steps that no army in the history of the world, including Britain, by the way, has ever taken to try to keep civilians safe. And so to try to tie Israel's hands, stop it going after the hostages, stop it going after Hamas, is frankly appalling and sends a message that only emboldens terrorists and tell them their tactics work.
Well, James, I put it to you that Labour will make Iran very happy by this, just to appease the pro-Palestine mob who used to be their voters.
It's not about appeasing anyone. It's not about appeasing anyone. And actually, we're going to talk about appeasing people. So what we're seeing is the British government right now going to do everything in its way, including the American government under Joe Biden. And it's very concerning as we approach elections, crucial elections in both Britain and America, that both governments are in this position where they are kowtowing to anything that Israel does. How far do we follow them down this rabbit hole, this murderous rabbit hole that Benjamin Netanyahu has taken the Israeli people down? The families of those hostages standing bravely in the streets saying he does not represent us, he does not stand for us. And he is taking the Israeli people on this crusade to save his own political career, and in doing so is murdering children and civilians every single day.
So, James, just sticking with you on this then. So is Labour, under a Labour government, which we may well have in a few months' time, seriously going to make an enemy of Israel and with it lose a key ally in a vital part of the world, undo decades and decades of foreign policy? That's what a vote for the Labour government would be, is it?
I don't understand how you've come to that conclusion, Patrick.
Well, he wants to arrest the leader, so it's pretty strong.
They haven't said that they want to arrest the leader. They said they respect the ICC's independence. When is it that we've started saying as a country that international bodies and important establishment organisations like the ICC are all of a sudden the bad guys and they're all of a sudden some fringe, crazy left-wing groups? It's absolute nonsense. We respect and should respect the independence of the ICC. And the very fact that they're saying that they want Benjamin Netanyahu arrested and that they're going to recommend that. And obviously we'll see what the result is in the end, when the vote comes to it. But that's the important thing, is that the independence is respected in the meantime. Labour isn't passing judgment on that. What David Lammy said.
I wonder if that's the point, that Labour isn't passing enough judgment on it.
It shouldn't pass judgment. The independence of the ICC is a call. It should be independent.
All right, Elon, come back to that. And then the ICC is an independent institution. We are duty-bound to respect it.
The Israeli defense minister found out that the prosecutor was seeking an arrest warrant from CNN. That just tells you the level that this is political theatre, a political farce, and this is not serious. Just look at the allegations that we are talking about. Accusations that Israeli leaders are responsible for extermination, for God's sake. We are fighting a campaign to get hostages back, to destroy Hamas, and along the way we have been urging civilians time and again, surrendering the element of surprise to get out of Hamas strongholds. Before this major operation in Rafah now, hundreds of thousands of people people fleeing because Israel is telling them, please get out of the way, terrorists are trying to hold you as human shields. The allegation of deliberate starvation, as if over 500 million tons of aid have not entered Gaza since the start of the war, most of it food, as if Israel has not added 3 new land crossings, facilitated airdrops and opened a brand new port. Israel is allowing unrestricted amounts of humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. That's why the markets there are full. That's why the prices there have collapsed. There is a problem that Hamas is hijacking aid, and when you take that and spin it against your own ally, frankly, I think it should leave Britain's other allies around the world feeling...
James, all right, Elon. Look, James, can I just ask this to you? Because, I mean, by extension, I think, of what David Lammy has said today, I mean, it would only seem natural to me that a Labour government would then also seek to stop selling arms to Israel, would seek to cut a load of diplomatic ties with Israel. You would have to do that. If the ICC court decides that Benjamin Netanyahu needs to be arrested and the Labour Party back that, we would have to sever diplomatic and military ties with Israel. Is that really what a vote for a Labour government would mean? Would you back that?
I think back in whatever the ICC says, it's not a question of whether we go that. I mean, it's not convenient. Morals aren't convenient a lot of the time, Patrick, and they're not comfortable. But when friends and allies commit atrocities, you have to be able to hold them to account. And what I would say to Elon is, to say that Britain somehow is duty-bound to protect Israel when Israel has just killed British civilians, what kind of friend and ally does that? What kind of friend and ally, reacts in the way that they've done to our civilians who are on the ground providing aid to Palestinian people? This is murder.
I think a friend and ally stands by Israel as it fights to bring back the hostages who represent 24 nations, including British nationals.
To save
but I do put it to you, James, that there is a bit of a blind spot here from David Lammy, which is let's play the tape forward, which is, OK, so let's say the ICC decide that Netanyahu needs to be arrested and the Labour Party back that and they wash their hands of it and say, we're duty-bound to do this, and then Labour gets elected, and then how on earth do they have diplomatic relations with our key ally in that region? And can I also put it to you, James, we reported this yesterday, that the polls are in from the West Bank, and it shows that support for Hamas is actually on the rise. So a free Palestine is a terror state.
It's on the rise.
It is.
Of course it's on the rise.
Yeah, exactly. So they would vote for Hamas, right? So you would stop arming Israel to allow Hamas in.
What would you do if your children were being killed? They are being pushed into the arms of terrorists who are taking advantage of them. That is the doing of Israel, and Israel is furthering that, and it benefits Benjamin Netanyahu to do so. And as I would say, finally, on the Benjamin Netanyahu issue is, if you break alliance with Benjamin Netanyahu, you are not giving up on Israel as a country. Britain should be an ally with Israel and should stand side by side with the Israeli people. Benjamin Netanyahu is not Israel. He does not represent Israel.
Elon, OK, James, all right. Look, Elon, can I just ask you, look, what would it mean for Britain? OK, let's localise this. What would this mean for Britain if we had a Labour government and they were full square behind an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu? What would that look like for us here?
I think it would be appalling for Britain on the world stage. It would be throwing its most powerful ally in the Middle East under a bus while Israel is fighting against Hamas, which is an Iranian proxy army, which is on the same side as the Houthis that have been attacking British ships and British personnel in the Middle East. The fact is, Israel and the United States are strong allies based not only on shared democratic values, but shared interests of stability in the Middle East, while Hamas fights on the same side as the Iranian regime, an enemy of Britain, of the Houthis, an enemy of Britain. The sides are very clear, and it's a very simple moral choice for the world. Are you going to back the terrorist organization that is vowing to do October 7th again and again while it holds over 100 hostages? Or are you going to back the democratic ally that is trying to prevent those barbaric atrocities in which whole families were burned alive in their beds? That is the choice. And the Israeli people are united in their determination that we must bring the hostages home and make sure that Hamas can never do that again. I mentioned the hostages' families. Saturday night, I was hosting the rally for the hostages' families.
Elon, look, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid.
Everyone is united in the belief that there must be pressure
Elon, all right, look, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid.
Hostages go.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. James, I'm going to give you literally 10 seconds, mate. I'm sorry, but go on, finish it
All
off.
I would say is on one point that Elon's just made there, because they're all wrong, unfortunately, all the points he's made, but one point I would challenge is that when he talks about the Houthis being enemies of Britain,
apart from the ones that are true.
The fact that they've attacked British personnel, so have Israel. Does that make them an enemy?
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. We asked for a head-to-head, we got one, so thank you. That is the former Israeli government spokesperson there, Elon Levy, and former Labour speechwriter James Matthewson. Thank you. Right, look, coming up, the Austrian Chancellor, this is big, has branded the UK a pioneer for its Rwanda plan, and he's not alone.
Indeed, what we've just seen in the last few weeks is 15 EU countries actually all making the same point, that that's what this requires. That's why our Rwanda scheme is so important.
Well, will the European Union now follow suit and help quash lefty opposition to the Rwanda scheme? I take on the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandia, who still thinks it's a terrible idea. Plus, I show you why this belly flop has sparked outrage. But first, as it's revealed that 24,000 supersized families, which means they've got more than, get this, 13 kids, are costing the taxpayer a whopping 150 million quid in child benefit claims, is it time to slash child benefit payments? Reform MP Lee Anderson is fired up and ready to go, and he's next.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another cooler day on Wednesday with some very heavy and persistent rain for some of us. We do have weather warnings in force for a large swathe of the UK throughout Wednesday. That's as this weather front approaches from the south and east, wrapped around an area of low pressure through this evening. So some very heavy rain to come through this evening across the southeastern areas of England in particular. We could also see some thunderstorms for the first few hours of this evening across the west as well. But that rain will become more confined to the east coast just throughout tonight. And it will turn a little bit drier elsewhere, but there will be a lot of cloud around by tomorrow morning. So it will be another fairly mild start to the day. But some drizzly rain will start to affect parts of the east coast just as that weather front starts to approach. So the east coast of Scotland could see quite a lot of low cloud around. But the northwest of Scotland could see some brightness first thing, but that rain will arrive later on in the day. Across Northern Ireland, some showery rain, but it's not expected to be as heavy as it has been through today. But it's across parts of North Wales, the Midlands, northeastern England in particular, where the rain will be the heaviest first thing. And that will continue to persist throughout the day. So as the day goes on, I think any impacts from the rain will become more likely as more weather warnings come into force. As that rain pushes up into Scotland, we've got another weather warning in force for Scotland. We could see up to 100 millimetres, perhaps more, fall over the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday, particularly across parts of North Wales into northern areas of England. So that could bring some major travel disruption. And temperatures are going to be disappointing for the time of year with plenty of cloud around. Rain continues into Thursday, particularly across the north and west. It's this north area of Wales where there's the most potential for some disruptive heavy rain, but it will turn more showery as the day goes on. And across the south, it will start to turn a little bit brighter by the afternoon. A mix of showers as we head towards Friday, and by Saturday, a chance of some sunshine and temperatures climbing towards 20 degrees.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Now, coming up, are 15 EU countries about to adopt a Rwanda-style scheme? But first, shocking new figures have been revealed. That supersized families of more than 13 children are each claiming £229 a week in child benefits. So they are among the 24,000 households that claim child benefits for 6 or more kids, and in total this racks up a whopping £150 million of taxpayers' cash each year. Currently, there is no limit on the number of kids you can claim for, but the figures have raised serious questions about the need for a cap, much like the 2-child benefit cap, which restricts universal credit payments to the first 2 kids in most households. I'm joined now by Reform UK MP Lee Anderson. Lee, do we need to stop all this child benefit for people who've got 13 kids?
Well, I think we need to stop something, Patrick. I mean, some of these parents are very active. 13 kids seems a lot in this day and age. You know, back in the day, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it was commonplace that families would have 8 or 9 children, but they had to work hard, Patrick. They had to, work hard to keep their own children. Nowadays, it seems that if you have as many children as you want to, that the state will pick the tab up. It's not fair on the hard-working taxpayer. And I strongly suggest that if people can have 13 kids, a lot of these are on state benefits. They don't go to work. I know this from the people that I see in my surgery. They probably need to get out more, get a job and contribute towards society.
I worry about the message it actually sends to the kids as well, if they've got parents there that are essentially pumping more out to spend a life on benefits.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it does send the wrong message out because these children are being brought up in a culture of nobody going to work in the household. It's more profitable, Patrick. We know this. If there's a lot more children in the house, the parents probably don't go to work. They're probably, they're dependent on state benefits. Completely sends the wrong message out to children. They're living in a culture where nobody actually goes to work in the household, living on benefits. It's not fair on the state and it's not fair on the children.
So, look, what do we actually do about this then? Do we put a cap on it? Do we just say, look, if you have more than, 4 or 5 kids... I mean, you can't stop people reproducing, so there is that.
Well, we haven't got a benefit cap, Patrick, but there are certain, there's certain ways around the benefit cap, and I think it's about 22, 23 grand a year, and probably a little bit more in London, but there's certain ways that the claimants can get around this. You can work a few hours a week and then you're exempt. Somebody in the household could be disabled. It could be the old man with the bad back, the old bad back syndrome. That sort of circumnavigates the benefit system. And some of these people are raking in 40, 50, 60 grand a year in benefits. That's not fair, Patrick.
OK, well, we're kind of keeping it work-related or lack of here because unemployed Brits will be dispatched to skills boot camps under a new government plan to cut down on immigration and plug worker shortages. Now, particularly in the hospitality and social care sectors. So this is looking to try to make it an army of British workers. Speaking to GB News earlier today, the Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride hailed the plans as a big opportunity for British workers.
This is an opportunity to really address this issue now that migration is coming down and will be coming down quite dramatically, to get the domestic British people into those domestic jobs across the domestic labour market.
Right, OK, so this is a way of getting Brits to do the jobs that we rely on low-skilled, low-pay migration for. It's a good idea, isn't it?
Look, Patrick, let's be clear. Bone-idle dole-scroungers should be made to go to work, and if they do not go to work, they should have their benefits stopped. This boot camp, skills camp, is, for me, a load of nonsense. It's simple. It's carrot and stick. If you do not go to work, you don't get benefits, and then you have to go and fend for yourself. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But in the meantime, we have a ready supply of people from all over the world who are willing to come in and do the job. So, a boot camp might be a good idea.
Listen, Patrick, let's stop being ridiculous. I mean, we need fruit picking in the fields, we need vegetables picking, we need, stuff picking in factories. You don't need a skills boot camp to teach people how to pick potatoes out of a field. Absolute rubbish.
OK, now, Lee, talking of food a little bit, you mentioned there, your breakfast has gone viral this morning, possibly in more ways than one, with this tweet viewed by more than, get this, 1 million people. 1 million people had a look at your full English there. So, Lee, is your breakfast racist?
Well, look, Pat, it's actually 2.2 million at the last glance I had of this. I was having breakfast this morning in Parliament in Portcullis House. I thought I'd take a quick photo just to see if...
Can we bring it up? Can we keep it up? Go on, Lee, carry on.
I'm looking at the plate and I'm thinking to myself, we've had a lot of racist things over the past few years in this country. We've had racist cheese, racist countryside. I'm looking at the breakfast plate. That black pudding looks particularly black. Even the white bits are black in that, Patrick. The sausage looks burnt. The mushrooms look awful. It's looking pretty racist.
Where are the beans, though?
Well, there's no beans. I mean, I did actually look for the beans. I couldn't find them this morning. I looked for my vitamin C. I couldn't find the tomatoes. It doesn't look a good breakfast. It looks particularly racist, and I shan't be having that tomorrow.
I mean, is this presumably you are making a joke about how the woke brigade decide that now everything is racist, even when it obviously isn't?
It is. It's tongue-in-cheek, Patrick. Yeah. But this is how, daft we get in this country. The left, the wokerati, always looking for something to accuse us of being racist or bigoted or whatever it is. Just a bit of fun. It's funny, though, isn't it? 2.2 million views for a plate full of snap.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's true. I mean, to be fair, Lee, whatever you tweet does tend to go viral. So, for one reason or another, look, hey, that was Reform UK MP Lee Anderson. Thank you very, very much. Coming up, as the pro-Palestine mob demand a meeting with the Metropolitan Police Chief over intimidation... Are they taking the mickey by trying to play the victim? I picked the mob apart at 10. Plus, big interview. This Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister, has demanded the Prime Minister stand firm on a graduate visa crackdown to help curb sky-high legal migration.
Just urge the Prime Minister to act and to begin to rebuild some of the lost trust and confidence of the public.
Well, he won't be happy with the development that happened in the last couple of hours, I'll tell you why. But next, as it comes in for praise from the Austrian Chancellor, will the UK's pioneering Rwanda plan inspire other nations to copy Britain? I take on the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandia. That's next.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
So, a private members club in London, the Garrick Club, has voted to allow women members for the first time in its history.
So it's been around for 193 years. Women were not allowed as members, but they could go in as guests of male members. But there was a vote last night. 60% said time to allow women in on equal terms.
We don't really care about being part of a stuffy boys' club, and to join us to talk about this is Georgia Gilholy. Good morning, Georgia. Do women care about this? Have the Guardian got nothing better to do?
Apparently not, considering we have a huge range of domestic and global crises ongoing at the moment. I think, first and foremost, this was a campaign. It's been successful now by and for elites. I believe the chief reporter at The Guardian who spearheaded this was Amelia Gentleman.
That's right.
And in the initial coverage, she didn't even mention that her father-in-law, I believe, Stanley Johnson, obviously the father of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, a very influential member of the Tory party. She didn't mention that he was a member, which I find bizarre. It's something that should have gone on that list if it was a list of influential members, which it was.
So hang on a minute, who's that?
Amelia Gentleman wrote the story in The Guardian. She's married to Joe Johnson, Boris's brother.
Boris's brother.
And so Stanley is a member of the Garrick, but she omitted that from her piece.
Ah. Yeah. And I think, the majority of British women won't have even heard of the Garrick Club, nor any sort of private members clubs in London. It's a very kind of elite inside thing.
It's actors, lawyers, writers.
I think they absolutely have their place, especially for networking with people in different careers or the same career as you. I think they have their place, holding charity events, that kind of thing, and conferences.
We already have members' clubs mixed, and that stuff is still not happening. Just putting men and women together in this one space isn't going to help women in terms of cross-gender networking.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, as Palestine Action demands a meeting with the Metropolitan Police over supposed intimidation that they've faced, I highlight their shameless hypocrisy at 10 p.m. But first, Rishi Sunak has been in Vienna today, meeting with the Austrian Chancellor to discuss issues including the migrant crisis in Europe. And it seems our government's bold plan to ship illegal migrants off to Rwanda has actually appealed to the Alpine nation.
We agree and we are strategic partners when it comes to making sure that asylum proceedings should happen in safe third countries. The UK is therefore also a pioneer for this model, a model and a path that will be important for the European as well.
That was a hard lesson, wasn't it? Anyway, this comes just weeks after Ursula von der Leyen said the European Commission wanted to implement the concept of safe third countries, which has since been echoed by governments across the EU.
Indeed, what we've just seen in the last few weeks is 15 EU countries actually all making the same point, that that's what this requires. That's why our Rwanda scheme is so important. We are pioneering something new. I said when I first got this job that where Britain leads, others would follow when it comes to tackling illegal migration, and you can see that that is now clearly the case. And just this year, in fact, we have returned 10,000 people back to other countries. That's 2,000 people more than we did last year.
Well, earlier on today, I spoke to Austrian social scientist, chairman of the European Stability Initiative, Gerald Noes, who thinks that the Rwanda plan could inspire a change throughout the continent. They're looking at...
Well, what you've seen in Europe in the last year is an intense discussion, which has now led 15 interior ministers to propose to develop the European asylum system in the direction of safe third country solutions, which means asylum status decided in third countries that are safe. And they are embracing this because they realize that the current system in the Mediterranean, with thousands of deaths and hundreds of thousands of people crossing, is a very bad system. And so they are watching what the UK is doing, and they are discussing among themselves how to move towards a system with safe third countries also for the European Union. But what a lot of people are now saying is it will not work. And I think there is a real risk that it will not work if the United Kingdom is not smart, because what I've seen so far, the plans by the UK government, and I tell you...
Yeah, there we go. Look, I'm delighted now to welcome the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandaya. Thank you very much for joining me. Can I ask, did you vote to remain in the EU?
I did.
How does it feel? 15 countries, 15 European nations now. Apparently, in fact, Brexit Britain, under a Labour government, might be one of the only ones who doesn't implement a Rwanda-style scheme. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's interesting that we are interested in what the EU think about our plans. I thought we didn't care about them.
Well, I mean, they're looking to implement it, and that's the lovely, fluffy bastion of democracy on the continent. Does that not give an air of legitimacy to what Britain wants to do?
I don't think so. I believe in taking responsibility, Patrick. And I think your viewers do too. You know, when you go out for dinner and you agree to split the cost of the meal together, and one of you decides to skive off and not pay, that's what we're doing when it comes to the Rwanda policy. We signed up to the Refugee Convention, and now we're reneging on that promise. We're saying we don't want to do it because it's too expensive. We're a wealthy country. We should be able to look after our own borders. We should be able to deal with people that are claiming asylum in our country and not palm them off to another country that we're paying to do our dirty work for us.
Look, can I just ask? I mean, you know, I was having a little look at online earlier, Dr. Christian. I believe, and I'm willing to stand corrected on this, it's just what I've seen online. I believe that you're quite active in the Baptist church community, and that was the group that was responsible for, you know, baptising Abdul Yazidi, for example, and helping to allow him to stay in Britain. And I just wonder if there's some ulterior motivation for you here, whether or not you necessarily have your finger on the pulse when it comes to who should and should not stay in Britain.
So churches are right across the country, not just Baptists, Anglicans, Catholics, you name it. We believe in showing kindness and compassion to anyone who needs it. You might be familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's something that's kind of been in the backbone of our nation's ethical mindset for thousands of years. We're not in control of who stays here and who doesn't. That's up to the Home Office.
You do help, though, don't you? And that guy was a sex attacker who went on to be an acid attacker.
the Home Office's own guidance says that a church leader's recommendations shouldn't be a determining factor. It's like when you give a reference for someone that goes for a job. If that is given in good faith from the best of your knowledge and that person ends up being a criminal, you're not responsible.
Well, he was already a criminal, though, wasn't he? Because he did have to have a chaperone at the church.
Well, we believe in something called a second chance, mercy, compassion, and all we can do is respond to the evidence that we've got in front of us. I don't know the details of what happened in that Baptist church, but I know that I've messed up a lot of stuff in my life, and becoming a Christian gave me a second chance.
Fair enough. I think that was quite a big boo-boo, though, wasn't it? But look, saving lives from people making decisions coming across the channel, dangerous journeys across the channel, that's what the European Union and member states are saying they want to do. Saving the day-to-day lives of ordinary Brits who don't want their countries to be ruined by mass illegal immigration. Do you actually care about saving lives?
Oh, definitely. And I think the Rwanda scheme targets the wrong people. We punish the people that are being trafficked and smuggled rather than going after the criminals themselves. Most of the people that do end up coming to our shores actually end up getting asylum. So they're not illegal asylum seekers. That's an oxymoron. They end up actually having a valid claim. And I do hope, actually, that Rishi Sunak, when he was in Austria, is listening to the Austrian scheme, because as opposed to the Rwanda scheme that we've got, if someone does get resettled through a third country under the Austrian scheme, they can claim asylum in Austria if they've got a valid claim. Well, our Rwanda scheme doesn't allow that.
All right. Dr. Krish, look, can I just say a massive thank you for coming on. It's always great to have your side of things on this particular show. Dr. Krish Kandia there, who is the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation. Coming up, the Prime Minister has watered down his graduate visa clampdown, a move likely to anger Robert Jenrick. And I spoke to Robert Jenrick a little bit earlier on, so I'll show you the full no-holds-barred interview. But next, well, I get stuck into the pro-Palestine mob. Frankly, you will absolutely not believe what they've decided to do now. I mean, some of these clips I'm about to show you are completely and utterly shocking. They are playing the victim. It's Patrick Christys tonight. I'll see you in a sec.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another cooler day on Wednesday with some very heavy and persistent rain for some of us. We do have weather warnings in force for a large swathe of the UK throughout Wednesday. That's as this weather front approaches from the south and east, wrapped around an area of low pressure through this evening. So some very heavy rain to come through this evening across the southeastern areas of England in particular. We could also see some thunderstorms for the first few hours of this evening across the west as well. But that rain will become more confined to the east coast just throughout tonight. And it will turn a little bit drier elsewhere, but there will be a lot of cloud around by tomorrow morning. So it will be another fairly mild start to the day. But some drizzly rain will start to affect parts of the east coast just as that weather front starts to approach. So the east coast of Scotland could see quite a lot of low cloud around. But the northwest of Scotland could see some brightness first thing, but that rain will arrive later on in the day. Across Northern Ireland, some showery rain, but it's not expected to be as heavy as it has been through today. But it's across parts of North Wales, the Midlands, northeastern England in particular, where the rain will be the heaviest first thing. And that will continue to persist throughout the day. So as the day goes on, I think any impacts from the rain will become more likely as more weather warnings come into force. As that rain pushes up into Scotland, we've got another weather warning in force for Scotland. We could see up to 100 millimetres, perhaps more, fall over the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday, particularly across parts of North Wales into northern areas of England. So that could bring some major travel disruption, and temperatures are going to be disappointing for the time of year with plenty of cloud around. Rain continues into Thursday, particularly across the north and west. It's this north area of Wales where there's the most potential for some disruptive heavy rain, but it will turn more showery as the day goes on. And across the south, it will start to turn a little bit brighter by the afternoon. A mix of showers as we head towards Friday, and by Saturday, a chance of some sunshine and temperatures climbing towards 20 degrees.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. You won't believe what the pro-Palestine lot have done now, seriously, and...
Just urge the Prime Minister to act and to begin to rebuild some of the lost trust and confidence of the public.
Well, you have just been betrayed again on immigration. Plus...
Right now, Britain is in the middle of a housing crisis.
Angela Rayner, with no hint of irony or shame, talks about houses. Also, what really went on during the flight from hell that cost a Brit his life. I've got all of tomorrow's newspapers tonight as well, with my top panel, and they are columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, Tory Deputy Chairman Jonathan Gullis, and author Amy Nicole-Turner. Oh yes, and you will never guess what happens next. Get ready, Britain, here we go. The pro-Palestine brigade are taking the absolute mickey. Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour. The 73-year-old British man who died after an aircraft was hit by severe turbulence on a flight from London Heathrow to Singapore has been named as Jeff Kitchen. The plane was forced to make an emergency landing in Bangkok. Airport officials believe the man may have suffered a heart attack. More than 50 people were hurt, 7 of them critically, after sustaining head injuries. Singapore Airlines confirmed there were 18 crew and 211 passengers on board. 47 were from the UK. A former Royal Marine accused of spying for the Hong Kong Intelligence Service has died in unexplained circumstances in a park in Berkshire. 37-year-old Matthew Trickett was charged with offences under the National Security Act earlier this month. Police officers were called to Grenfell Park in Maidenhead at around 5:15 p.m. on Sunday. A police cordon is in place as police continue to investigate the death, which is being treated as unexplained. The Prime Minister has addressed the issue of illegal migration during a visit to Austria. Rishi Sunak says EU countries are starting to recognise places like Rwanda are essential in tackling the problem, with 15 states calling on the European Commission to tighten migration policy. Speaking exclusively to GB News, the Prime Minister says the numbers prove progress is being made in stopping small boats and thousands of illegal migrants are being returned to other countries.
The numbers are down by around a third. They were down by around a third last calendar year as well. So we are making progress. And just this year, in fact, we have returned 10,000 people back to other countries. That's 2,000 people more than we did last year. So that shows the progress we're making. And including within that are 1,700 foreign national offenders. Again, 400 more than last year. So yes, we are making progress. Of course, there's more to do. I've been very clear that I won't stop until we have stopped the boats.
And a Conservative MP has spoken to GB News about his battle with sepsis, admitting he's extremely lucky to be alive. Craig McKinley is returning to Parliament for the first time tomorrow after suffering a life-threatening episode of sepsis in September, which led to the amputation of his hands and feet. The MP for South Thanet has spoken out about his road to recovery and now wants to be known as the first bionic MP.
Everything was starting to shut down. It was quite serious, and my wife was told that they'd very rarely see people of this amount of illness in the hospital and perhaps prepare for the worst. Maybe they could have saved a bit of a foot, but my surgeon said you are better off having them off because you can have prosthetics and you'll walk far better than having a partial foot. I'm hoping people might give me the benefit of the doubt and say that man's been a fighter for himself. He's damn well going to fight for me. I'm going to give him my support.
The bionic MP.
Bionic MP is what I want to be.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick.
The pro-Palestine movement is taking the absolute mickey. Palestine Solidarity Campaign has issued a statement demanding a meeting with the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley because they say they were subjected to frightening abuse, insults and provocation from a pro-Israel counter-protest. Well, that's interesting because there is some evidence to suggest that the opposite might be true. Just a woman there telling Jews to F off back to Europe. Lovely. That statement continues, though. Head stewards representing the 6 organisations involved in the Palestine marches were horrified to discover pro-Israeli protesters, who police had assured them would be behind barriers well away from the march, had been allowed to assemble directly on the agreed route, with only a space of 3 metres between them and hundreds of thousands of people trying to pass through. Many of the counter-protesters were holding placards accusing marchers of being rape supporters. Well, firstly, it wouldn't be like the pro-Palestine lot to enter a space they're not supposed to now, would it?
You've got no backbone and you guys are child killers and genocidal guys, all of you. Yes, I know this doctor here very well. You guys have no backbone, you are child murderers and you are obsessive-compulsive freaks controlling the body. You all are part of a genocide.
And it wouldn't be like them to hold up offensive posters, would it? There's some posters with Hitler's face on there, found at a pro-Palestine march. There's also some others of swastikas. There we go. And a Hamas bandana. Yep. That's just some of the stuff that Jews have to put up with. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign's letter continues. As reported by numerous stewards, march attendees and legal observers, they were screamed at, had phones shoved in their faces, and a number of young women stewards, many of them Muslims, were threatened directly. Meanwhile, the pro-Palestine brigade conducted themselves with absolute respect, didn't they?
And you are part of it!
And there's definitely no evidence at all to suggest that Jewish people in Britain need to fear that adults on the pro-Palestine marches are indoctrinating their children to grow up to be massive anti-Semites.
We're training our children. They're training their children to sort us out. You got me wrong. We're not training our children. We're training our children to train their children. That's worse.
The Palestine Solidarity Campaign continues in a letter to the Met Police. They say the treatment of the pro-Israel counter-protest by the police showed a completely different approach to the pro-Palestine demonstration. Gosh, two-tier policing, you say? Well, I never.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march.
Just a man there being blocked from going about his business by police for being visibly Jewish. And of course, it's not as if the police would be more heavy-handed with the pro-Israel protesters, is it? Today, Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, said this.
We know now that it is genuinely dangerous for people to be openly, clearly, proudly Jewish near these marches. At a time when we're all encouraged to be our whole authentic selves, to celebrate our identity, to be out and proud. There is only one group told that they, and they alone, can only be tolerated on terms set by others, Jews.
The pro-Palestine brigade can cry all they want to. The level of hypocrisy and entitlement here is laughable, given what they get up to, the way they behave and the damage they've caused. What they really want is for no pro-Israel people to be on their marches. They don't really want to see the Israeli flag, do they? They want them gone. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. I'm joined this evening by columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I've also got the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis, and author Amy Nicole Turner. Jonathan, I'll start with you on this. I mean, they actually are now calling for a meeting with Mark Rowley because they feel threatened and abused. I find that quite hypocritical.
Well, the only meeting some of these clowns who are on these hate marches should be having is one where they're under caution by the police, because ultimately when they're spewing that anti-Semitic hatred on the streets of this country, calling for the end of the Israeli-Jewish state and the only democracy in the Middle East, and quite frankly, I've got no sympathy. In fact, a lot of these people, particularly those who are on visas, should be immediately getting them revoked and getting them out of our country as well, because they pose a serious threat to national security and to our citizens, particularly those who are Jewish, up and down our great country. And so I find these protesters, these hate marchers, these clowns, to be quite frank, you know, an absolute abomination to our society. Well, and I'm bored senseless on our streets day in day out. You showed the video footage in Stoke-on-Trent of them invading a private function at a private fundraising campaign event for the Conservatives in our city. Okay. Some of these people involved in the setting up were part of, in the past, His But to Hear, now a prescribed terrorist organisation. Who knows what could have happened to the women and children who were present?
London March.
Well, no, I've seen enough of it, which sees the signs calling for the end of the Israeli state with this just disgusting chant from the river to the sea. I see the banners being held up that obviously push anti-Semitic tropes against Jewish people.
Can I ask? I take it you have?
I have. I went this weekend.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you can have such massively strong opinions about something you haven't been to.
You can see it all over the TV, all over social media. It's an abomination. It's boring. It's costing tens of millions of pounds of British taxpayers' money. It's taking police officers off the streets in places like Stoke-on-Trent, North. Kids go over and talk.
That's the most important point. Look, we do have freedom of speech and freedom of expression in this country, and that is fundamental, and that shouldn't be compromised. However, there should be limits on how you exercise that freedom of speech and how you choose to express yourself. You can express yourself by writing a letter, by having placards, by posting on Facebook. You don't necessarily need to express yourself by marching on the streets of London every weekend for weeks, for months, and costing the Metropolitan Police £32 million, because at that point you're threatening national security. People that actually need policing services are not able to access them because the police are tied up with these protests. You can argue that there have been salacious comments and abuse on both sides, but clearly the majority is from one side. You said that it's because there are more pro-Palestinian protesters. Fine, I recognise that. But you've had people like Jewish business owners, for instance, that are not allowed to open, or they can't open their businesses on days when these marches are happening, on prime days of the week, because they're in the kind of line of fire when these protests are happening. That's not acceptable.
I know you said you go on these marches.
No, I went to one this weekend with my son to find out once and for all what it's actually like.
Okay. Oh, I'm just going to play a clip of someone at one of these marches, which is I think, quite revealing.
So here I am at Piccadilly Circus. Maybe Jesus was right. Synagogue of Satan much? I condemn any killing of children or rape, but that's what they do. Do I condemn Hamas? No. Love and respect for fighting against the enemies of humanity, men with balls.
Can I just for a bit of context, there are hundreds of thousands of people at these protests.
250,000.
Exactly. I think it's a complete travesty and an abomination that, for some reason, the pro-Palestinian movement has become a haven for the mentally unwell and genuinely malicious. I can't imagine why that is to be the case, but I do think that a bunch of busybodies with nothing better to do that.
But what I want to know, though, Amy, is when you see repeated stuff like that, right? Are you going to keep marching? Would you march alongside people like that?
We marched from around Oxford Street to Whitehall. I didn't see a single thing like that. One thing I did see was when we went back round to Piccadilly, we saw the Israel counter-protest, and there I saw a woman screaming into a megaphone to the pro-Palestine protesters who were just walking past peacefully. She was shouting, "You're a rape apologist," and that was the thing that I was the most concerned about my son hearing from my whole experience of the day.
Seriously?
That's the truth.
Seriously.
But
there are people there.
And they had signs saying,
but there are people there justifying
terror sympathisers.
How much evidence
and
do
what
you
I
need
found,
to see
what I
that
found
this
was
stuff
that,
is going on? That's
that
what
the Israel counter-protests were very much, their signs were very much about the protesters, the individuals, the Palestine solidarity, whereas the Palestine signs were more about the Israeli government, the actions of the government.
The ones that have got Hitler's face on or swastikas on or all of that stuff, or the
Those are in the
paragliders
minority, and they're also not to do with the organisers. Like the
It's
Palestinian Solidarity Campaign would not associate with that whatsoever. So, of course, come down hard on
Amy,
that.
honestly. Look, Jonathan, I don't know. If this was the other way around...
Look, did you see that?
Seriously, if this was the other way around, Jonathan, how do you feel about people who are willing to march alongside these people?
I think, ultimately, if you end up on a march and you look around and you're surrounded by people pushing anti-Semitism, I would seriously question whether or not to be on those marches. If I went to a march in solidarity for our veterans and I was surrounded by the far right who were pushing very racist material, whether that be on placards or through chanting, I would physically remove myself in order to make it very clear these people do not stand up for the values and beliefs that I hold. And yet... hundreds of thousands of people continue to march side by side by anti-Semites who ultimately need a conversation with the police, yes, under caution, hopefully in cuffs, soon to be hopefully in prison, and if they do not need to be here, hopefully deported out of our country. Get the damn stamp out. Deport these extremists from our society who are perpetuating this dangerous ideology. We're back in 1930s Germany, something that Gary Lineker's a big fan of when he wants to talk about it. Yet when it comes to this on the streets of London, he seems to be utterly silent. This is what the virtue signalling class on social media, the metropolitan elites in London, do not seem to understand. The people in places like Stoke are sick and tired of this openly vile anti-Semitic extremism being perpetuated on the streets, whilst also decimating our own police force in our own local area because they're having to come down to London to protect people down there.
The amount of police time.
I think the main point is that you haven't actually been, and you.
I would want to go because I actually think it would be dangerous.
So you're talking from a point of ignorance.
To go.
I've been to loads of them. I've been to loads of them.
To be fair, also Rishi Sunak has committed, I think, £30 million to boost the security for MPs. I don't think he should really be there. Anyway,
actually, yeah.
But anyway, but
I just think it's interesting.
I think listen, at some point it becomes futile to say which side is more toxic than the other, and I do think.
But neither side is toxic, really.
Because I do think that's a semantics game. I think the fundamental issue here is what is actually costing the British public for the Metropolitan Police to be spending tens of millions of pounds policing these protests for months on end at the expense of the average British person having access to police services. I don't think that's good. Yeah. I'm sorry. You have freedom of speech, you have freedom of expression, but there comes a point where the public's interest has to curtail certain forms of freedom of expression.
Right, but I think if the political class were in sync with public opinion, then they wouldn't have to protest.
It's not about public opinion. You can have your public opinion on Facebook. You don't have to be on the streets of London.
Yeah.
Not much is going to change.
Sorry.
All right, we're going to draw under it there. Look, coming up, did the BBC show their true colours with this bizarre response to the it's mental this. The butcher of Tehran's death, all right? We debate it as I bring you the very first of tomorrow's from about, all right. But now, plus, sheer terror at 37,000 feet. I will show you the chilling aftermath of this Singapore Airlines turbulence that tragically cost a British man his life. But next, senior Tories like former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick won't be happy to hear that Rishi Sunak is now planning to weaken his clampdown on legal migration.
Just urge the Prime Minister to act and to begin to rebuild some of the lost trust and confidence of the public.
I bring you that full interview next, and he does not hold back. Stay tuned to Patrick Christys Tonight.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we're delighted about this because the boss of JD Wetherspoon has credited demand for fashionable Guinness as the pub chain reported a jump in sales.
Now, Guinness has benefited from a boom in demand over recent years, shaking off its association with rugby lads and old men to appeal to a much younger audience and loads more women.
We've got our Guinness here.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
I'm not sure about this boozing on air at this time of the morning, but I'll let you off on this occasion.
As it's you, Tim, as it's you. Now, Guinness is an acquired taste for many people, so I'm surprised it's become so popular.
Yes, it is a real surprise. I think it's always been a popular drink among the demographic you mentioned, the older guy. There's about 80 or 90% of pub trade over the last 30 or 40 years, and probably longer, are a similar range of products. But there's a varying 10, 20% according to fashion. You had vodka Red Bull 20 years ago. You had an Irish cider poured over ice, which came from no one knows where. You had Alco Pops. So there's an unpredictable range of products which have been the fashion of the moment. But the fashion of the moment, very unpredictably this time, is Guinness. And no one knows why. As you say, it's an acquired taste. Young people tend not to like it. Most of the fashionable drinks over the decades have been quite sweet. And Guinness obviously isn't. So, yes, I think the Guinness brewery, St James's Gate in Dublin, they'll say it's brilliant marketing. But like the rest of us, they rely a bit on luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Still to come, I bring you the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with my top panel of pundits. But first, well, the Prime Minister has faced a significant cabinet revolt against plans to crack down on the number of people arriving in Britain on graduate visas, widely regarded, by the way, as a backdoor into Britain. The Chancellor, the Home Secretary, the Education Secretary and the Foreign Secretary all urged Rishi Sunak not to tighten existing restrictions on graduate immigration. A government source warned The Times, this is the difference between growth and recession. I mean, come on. All this despite net migration in Britain hitting a record high of nearly 750,000 in the latest available figures. Well, earlier on, I spoke to former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who said that the Prime Minister must stand firm against this ridiculous onslaught from people, believe it or not, including the current Home Secretary, and actually crack on and reduce immigration. Extraordinary scenes today, Mr Jenrick, with the Foreign Secretary, the Education Secretary, the Chancellor and the Home Secretary appearing to lobby against scrapping the graduate visa scheme. I mean, dealing with Lord Cameron first, he's not elected, he's beyond his brief. Is he overreaching here?
Well, look, I preferred the former version of David Cameron when he was Prime Minister, and he set our manifesto at reducing legal migration to the tens of thousands, and along with Nick Clegg, he scrapped the graduate route. So I'm disappointed if he's now campaigning to stop us from controlling migration and reducing the number of students coming into the country in this way. I've been campaigning both within government and now, since resigning from the cabinet, to control our borders, to ensure that we reduce the number of people coming into the country legally. And one of the ways we can do that is by scrapping the graduate route.
A lot of people scratching their heads today about the Home Secretary's role in all of this. He's privately been accused of rubbishing the Rwanda plan, now appears not to want to bring down graduate visas either. What is the point of him?
Well, look, I think it's incredibly important, as I've said time and again, both in government and after I resigned, that we as politicians meet our promises. We made a very clear pledge at the general election in 2019 to bring down the level of net migration, and that was just one of many manifestos throughout my entire adult lifetime where we have said we're going to control and reduce migration. I think it is immensely corrosive to trust in politics and democracy if we keep on breaking these pledges. And I, for one, am not willing to be just another politician who makes promises on migration and doesn't meet them.
Could you just explain to our viewers and our listeners why, in your view, it is so important to scrap this graduate visa scheme? Some people say it's a backdoor into Britain. Other people say, look, universities need this to exist.
Well, back in the coalition government, we made a decision to scrap the predecessor to the graduate route, and then 2 years ago, we changed tack, or the ministers at the time did, and brought this back. It's not worked as they envisaged. It's led to a very large increase in the number of students coming into the country from overseas. And some of the universities that have taken advantage of it are essentially selling immigration rather than education. Only a quarter of those students who've come in are from the Russell Group universities, so most are coming to the UK to do short courses at lower tier universities, and that is putting further pressure on housing, on infrastructure, on our country for little benefit. What we want to see, Neil O'Brien and I, who wrote a report recently on this issue, is that those students who come here and then wish to remain in the UK at the end of their studies have to quickly get a graduate level job, just like anyone else who's looking to come into the country from overseas. We don't think that's too much to ask. That's what we mean when we say that we want the best and the brightest to come to this country. We don't want people to be studying here and then going to work as Deliveroo drivers. We want them to be doing things that make a real contribution to the UK. And the most recent stats that we have available show that 40% of those coming to the UK as international students and then staying on under the graduate route are earning as little as £15,000 a year in their first year after completing their studies. And I think to most reasonable people, that's not sensible. That is not the best and the brightest going on to do graduate level jobs.
So I suppose your message to Rishi Sunak on this will be to stand firm and not necessarily listen to the Foreign Secretary, the Education Secretary, the Chancellor or the Home Secretary on this. And also, I believe that visa figures are out either tomorrow or the day after. What are you expecting from that?
Well, I don't know is the honest answer, and so we'll have to wait and see. But whatever the outcome is, they're going to be very high. They're going to be far in excess of our manifesto commitment and what I want to see, which is that we bring down the numbers to at least the tens of thousands. And I've proposed that we meet that commitment, not with further fine words, but with a legally binding cap set by Parliament so that the public can finally have confidence that we're going to get a grip on this issue. And taking action on the graduate route is just one of a number of things that we need to do, but which we could do immediately to make this issue finally under control. And so I would just urge the Prime Minister to act and to begin to rebuild some of the lost trust and confidence of the public with our party on this issue. As I say, I was not prepared to just be a bystander. I was not prepared to allow this to go unchecked when I was minister. That's why I resigned from the cabinet.
Well, you mentioned there about illegal immigration. Other countries, that's the news today anyway, other countries are now looking at copying our Rwanda plan. I think Austria seem very keen on it. They've gone over the top and said this is a good thing. Rishi Sunak's also banging the drum. He told GBNews exclusively earlier today that he's managed to deport 10,000 people, or return 10,000 people, I should say, back to their home country. That's 2,000 up, I believe, on this time last year, so he says. What's your view on other countries coming round to the idea of a Rwanda plan and those returns?
Well, I think the Rwanda plan is incredibly important, and I've been one of its greatest proponents. If we can make it work and ensure that it is a genuine deterrent, then I am confident that other countries will copy it. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister has chosen to pursue the Rwanda policy in a half-hearted manner. I don't believe that the symbolic flights that he's proposing will be a deterrent, and I would be very worried that as a result of that it will fail and will be scrapped by a Labour government. That's why it is so critical that he pursues a much more robust version of this policy, like the one that I propose, which would scrap Tony Blair's Human Rights Act, would ensure that there are not a myriad of legal challenges from individuals making claims, and protect us from the activist judges in Strasbourg. The Prime Minister has not chosen to do any of those things so far. I think that's a serious mistake. But of course, I always hope that he changes tack and pursues Rwanda in a robust manner.
Well, since speaking to Mr Jenrick, it has been revealed that tomorrow Rishi Sunak is going to announce a heavily weakened crackdown on the graduate visa route. So, yeah, that's been called a migration spin fest. The government is expected to put figures out that show that visa applications have gone down, good, but simultaneously announce a massive watering down of the previously promised reforms of the graduate visa route. So, just to emphasise, Cameron, the Education Secretary, the Chancellor and the Home Secretary, that is the most bonkers one of all of this. The Home Secretary have said, please don't do this. And he's caved in. After successful lobbying by all of those people, this package apparently he's going to put forward will fall short of the tougher restrictions that Tory MPs like Robert Jenrick demanded, like drastically reducing the 2-year working window post-graduation and restricting the scheme to top Russell Group institutions. So essentially, that back door into Britain appears like it's going to be left wide open. Seriously. And can I just say, look, what is the point of a Home Secretary that thinks privately, apparently, that the Rwanda scheme is bonkers, and also, as well, does not appear particularly interested in actually reducing a migration loophole? No doubt James Cleverly would deny that, but actions do speak louder than words. Coming up, we hit out at the BBC for claiming the butcher of Tehran had a, quote, mixed legacy. Plus, I will show you inside that Singapore Airlines plane, that flight from hell that plunged 7,000 feet in 3 minutes during terrifying turbulence that cost a British pensioner his life. But next, I'll be bringing you a very first look at tomorrow's front pages. Don't move.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another cooler day on Wednesday with some very heavy and persistent rain for some of us. We do have weather warnings in force for a large swathe of the UK throughout Wednesday. That's as this weather front approaches from the south and east, wrapped around an area of low pressure through this evening. So some very heavy rain to come through this evening across the southeastern areas of England in particular. We could also see some thunderstorms for the first few hours of this evening across the west as well. But that rain will become more confined to the east coast just throughout tonight. And it will turn a little bit drier elsewhere, but there will be a lot of cloud around by tomorrow morning. So it will be another fairly mild start to the day. But some drizzly rain will start to affect parts of the east coast just as that weather front starts to approach. So the east coast of Scotland could see quite a lot of low cloud around. But the northwest of Scotland could see some brightness first thing, but that rain will arrive later on in the day. Across Northern Ireland, some showery rain, but it's not expected to be as heavy as it has been through today. But it's across parts of North Wales, the Midlands, northeastern England in particular, where the rain will be the heaviest first thing. And that will continue to persist throughout the day. So as the day goes on, I think any impacts from the rain will become more likely as more weather warnings come into force. As that rain pushes up into Scotland, we've got another weather warning in force for Scotland. We could see up to 100 millimetres, perhaps more, fall over the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday, particularly across parts of North Wales into northern areas of England. So that could bring some major travel disruption, and temperatures are going to be disappointing for the time of year with plenty of cloud around. Rain continues into Thursday, particularly across the north and west. It's this north area of Wales where there's the most potential for some disruptive heavy rain, but it will turn more showery as the day goes on. And across the south, it will start to turn a little bit brighter by the afternoon. A mix of showers as we head towards Friday, and by Saturday, a chance of some sunshine and temperatures climbing towards 20 degrees.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back. It's time to give you the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Let's do it. So I lead in with the Metro. Extreme turbulence on Boeing 777. Brit dies in jet plunge at 38,000 feet. Harrowing story, that. The Daily Telegraph now. I lost my hands and feet to sepsis, says MP. Now, look. This is Craig McKinley. He did an unbelievable documentary with Christopher Hope, our political editor, earlier on. I would urge everybody to go back and watch that. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be all over social media if you've got us on catch-up. What a heroic, heroic man who, yep, sadly lost his hands and feet to sepsis, but is battling on. Battling on. He'll be in the House of Commons tomorrow, I believe. So we go to the Daily Mail. Nightmare at 37,000 feet. I mean, there's 1,000 feet worth of difference between their front page and the Metros, but I think we'll let them off. Unfortunately, a British grandfather has died in the turbulence terror. The Guardian, the same. They've got the picture story there, which is the inside of that aircraft. Alarm, though, they lead with alarm over big increase in under 40s with diabetes, obesity, junk food and gross inequality, blamed for 39% rise in 6 years. Well, I'll tell you what, it's a good job, isn't it? We're not allowed to advertise fast food on the London Underground, because if these people saw a picture of a hot dog, that figure would be something like 45% at least. Let's go to the Eye. Brit charged with spying for China found dead in Maidenhead Park. Wow. So 6 days after appearing in court, charged with spying on Hong Kong activists in the UK, former Royal Marine is discovered dead in Berkshire. Apparently this is an unexplained death. A post-mortem will follow. So, wow. That's, yeah, it is indeed. Let's go to the Mirror. Terror in the sky, yep, similar story here. It's that plane incident, isn't it? Daily Express, British granddad killed in flight horror plunge, yep, there we go. There's also the similar stuff on the Times. There's also a big story on the front of the Times, actually, I will say, which is make fewer arrests to help jails, police told. So the police are being told to make fewer arrests to stop putting people in prison. So that's great, isn't it, really? That's where we are now, which is lovely. So, yeah, there we go. But there is... I've got my panel here with me, so I'll reintroduce those in case you are just joining us, of course. I have got the wonderful columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I've got Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Jonathan Gullis, and author Amy Nicole-Turner. So, we're going to go now to Angela Rayner, I believe, because she was out and about discussing homes and property today. And I know what you're thinking. But no, it wasn't about that, OK? So as we know, the Labour deputy leader has been investigated by police over claims that she failed to pay tax on her former council house. And without a shred of irony, she took the stage in Leeds at the UK Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum. There, she pledged her party would build 1.5 million new homes within months of getting into government.
Right now, Britain is in the middle of a housing crisis. In hostels across the country, there are kids in temporary accommodation doing their homework on bathroom floors. Couples are stuck living with parents, unable to move in and start a family, and people's lives have been put on hold because there just aren't enough homes.
Is that an astonishing lack of self-awareness there from Angela Rayner, Jonathan?
Well, look, obviously Angela's currently being questioned under caution by Greater Manchester Police, so I can't possibly comment further. I'm sure she'll have lots to say, as long as they found, I suppose, which house in order to go and question her at would have been the interesting thing there. But look, Angela's also quite ironic with this whole speech, because actually there was no plan whatsoever, ironically something Labour's favourite thing to do. The fact of the matter is that there's been around 1 million homes built by the end of this Parliament, 250,000 through the affordability of home scheme. And if you look at like places like Stoke-on-Trent, you're actually building on average 200 homes more per year since we took power in 2020, compared to the disastrous Labour legacy that they left our city under Blair and Brown, which, as we know, when they're busy selling the gold or going into people's pension pots and raiding it, you know, they are quite the disgraces.
Can I just say it might be a slightly less rosy picture for the Tory party on the front of the Times, which I'm going to bring up now. So number 10 are neglecting Rishi Sunak's more popular colleagues, lament minister. So this is number 10 need to stop trying to placate Rishi Sunak and instead give airtime to more popular colleagues such as Kemi Badenoch and Penny Mordaunt. That's what Johnny Mercer has been said. He accused number 10 of behaving as though Rishi Sunak was still as popular as when he took office. The way that we know this is because apparently Johnny Mercer got caught writing a memo about this on his laptop on a train. And there he is. If we could remove the strap for a second on the bottom of the screen, I don't know if we can, but I think, yeah, just to make it abundantly clear that Johnny Mercer's also got his trotters out when he's doing this. So slightly poor train etiquette there. In the memo, Mercer accused Downing Street operation of focusing on placating Sunak and managing him. Basically said that they've got more popular MPs. Esther, I'll start with you. Is Rishi Sunak too toxic for the Tories?
Well, he's the Prime Minister, so I don't know if the plan is to hide him away. Like, just forgetting that this man is the Prime Minister. Look, there are obviously more popular MPs, but that's not very difficult to find. When was the last time we found a universally popular Prime Minister? I do think Penny Mordaunt and Kemi Badenoch, that's a good shout, but, you know, it depends on whether they're covering things that are relevant to their office. Right, he's the Prime Minister, so he's the most suitable to talk about anything to do with the country.
You've got a Veterans Minister here, Amy, who's saying, basically, paraphrasing, but, you know, the public need to see less of Rishi Sunak in order for the Tories to do better.
But apparently we need to see more of his bare feet.
Bad training.
But do you remember when you had that video of somebody clipping their toenails?
Oh, yeah.
And you couldn't see their face?
Was it Johnny?
Was it Johnny?
No.
Was it Johnny? No, it wasn't Johnny, to be fair.
I think he's making that line because Kemi and Penny are more attractive than Rishi.
Do you think this is a looks thing, do you?
Of course, but good looks always works in politics.
Good looks
look at Boris.
That's an outlier.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
I think he's a fine hunk of a man, Boris. I think Rishi's very pretty too, may I say, as well.
I think there's a few people who found Boris Johnson attractive in that time for one reason or another.
You know what? University-era Gordon Brown does it for me.
Oh, come off.
Oh, of course it does. Of course it does.
Fair enough.
Really
Jonathan, I have to put this to you, that, you know, you now have the rather unprofessional scene of a minister with his shoes off on a train writing a memo on a laptop in public. That slams your leader.
Well, Johnny has an opinion, and obviously he's made that, he's written out a memo which has somehow been photographed. But let me be perfectly clear. I know the voters in Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk are very aware that they're going to either have Sir Flip-Flop, Sir Softy, in the words of his own MP,
or Sir Barefoot,
and Sir Keir Starmer, or they're going to have Rishi Sunak, who actually has a plan, understands what the people of my area want, has delivered hundreds of £1 million of levelling up funding, and therefore you will see Conservatives returned in Stoke-on-Trent across the Red Wall and a Conservative government after the next election as well. Let's be perfectly clear. They are hiding away David Lammy, they hide away they try to hide away the socialists, they hide away...
Jonathan, just come off script for 1 second, please.
All the time because of the radical extremism they espouse, which she was only keen to stand side by side with.
All right.
Steamroller.
Now, look, One of the biggest problems with this, Esther, is that both Kemi Badenoch and Penny Mordaunt are seen as the two most likely successors to Rishi Sunak, which appears that Johnny Mercer is bang in favour of.
Well, yes, that's probably another thing. Oh, well, Priti Patel as well is kind of in that mix. But yes, that does put a negative spin on things. See why they'd be reluctant to do that. But look, he's the Prime Minister. You can't hide him away like they've tried to do with Joe Biden.
Well, this
Sleepy Joe.
Those debates are going to be fascinating, aren't they? The Biden-Trump debates.
I'm not going to sleep that night. I will stay up all night to watch it.
Well, neither's Joe because of the amount. No.
By the way, whether or not Joe Biden allows a public audience in, that'll be interesting. Whether the public are even allowed to attend. At the moment, his team don't want a live public audience to be
spontaneous questions. I think he will be prepping those questions from now.
Yes. All right. Now look, we all know that getting a plane comes with a high risk. Well, not that high risk, but anyway, a risk. But dying from extreme turbulence, now that is extremely rare. But this was the aftermath of the Boeing 777 plane, which fell a whopping 7,000 feet after hitting an air pocket. It actually killed a man. So 73-year-old British granddad Jeff Kitchen sadly died on the plane, apparently from a heart attack. Jeff from Thornbury in Gloucestershire had just begun a 6-week trip to Singapore, Indonesia, Japan and Australia with his wife Linda when the tragedy struck. 30 others were injured after smashing their heads on the overhead baggage cabin so hard that they dented them. So Boeing said Singapore Airlines offers its deepest condolences to the family of the deceased. We deeply apologise for the traumatic experience that our passengers and crew members suffered on this flight. I mean, that is a lot of people's complete worst nightmare, isn't it? But there we go. Right, OK. Well, in another handbrake turn, time for our giveaway now. The biggest cash prize we've ever given away, £20,000. You can spend it however you like. It's totally tax-free. Here's how it can be yours.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking? Not lying, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me. This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, I crown tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass, and I show you why this belly flop has sparked international outrage. Yes, but next I bring you the rest of tomorrow's newspapers. Stay tuned.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling him a that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, so, you know, Gareth, speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
you know what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
All right, this is Patrick Christys tonight. I'm joined again by my press pack. We've got columnist and broadcaster Esther Crackey, Deputy Chairman of the Tory Party Jonathan Gullis, and author Amy Nicole-Turner. Now, if you missed this, well, I'm going to show it to you, because the BBC's recent blunder shows them referring to President Raisi as having a mixed legacy in a tribute to the former Iranian leader's sudden death, right? This is a man who was responsible for the execution of thousands of political prisoners. Is this really balanced reporting from the self-titled unbiased broadcaster? And we showed you the UN yesterday. They stood in remembrance of the murderous Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, a man dubbed, may I remind you, the Butcher of Tehran. And now the European Union have tweeted as well. The EU expresses its sincere condolences for the death of President Raisi and former Minister Abdullah Haim, as well as the members of their delegation and their crew. Can I just add this line at the end? Our thoughts go to the families. Right, OK. Esther, a mixed legacy for the Butcher of Tehran.
Yes, I understand that sounds ridiculous, because it is, but the BBC does have to be impartial, and they...
Ofcom will be happy then.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, they can't say he is a horrible man, which he is, because there are some people that actually liked him. He did have some supporters, so they have to say mixed legacy to seem as neutral as possible. We're not supposed to know the BBC's opinion about this human piece of rubbish, which he was.
OK.
And my condolences to the helicopter that lost its light.
OK, all right. Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, what do you make of this? A mixed legacy?
Well, Patrick, it won't shock you, will it, that I think, yet again, the BBC struggled to call Hamas terrorists. Apparently that's unfair. They seem to think
that was a blunder. That's their prescription.
They seem to think the Butcher of Tehran has a mixed legacy. I mean, like I say, Ofcom will be pleased because impartiality will be ticked off there. So thank God for that, I suppose. I'm sure Gary Lineker will be weeping as well into his cornflakes over the death of this tyrant. So let's be perfectly clear, yet again, it's the BBC completely out of touch with the reality of the world that we live in. BBC is completely out of touch with the reality of the British people and, more importantly, the women and girls in particular who were oppressed under his rule. And ultimately, yet again, let's just get it once and for all. Let's scrap the licence fee from the BBC and allow the British public to finally decide whether or not they want to tune in and pay for this nonsense.
All right, look, Amy, it's not, to be fair, it's not just the BBC, the EU have piped up as well, the UN have piped up. Apparently, I saw this just before we came on air, by the way, apparently the United Nations have lowered their flag to half-mast.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Now, but you can kind of understand the UN one because they have to treat all member states equally.
No.
So when it was more of a formality.
No.
Iran are a nuclear power, so I think it's probably better to keep them sort of on side and be polite in that sense.
Yeah, they nuke the UN headquarters.
What are they going to do?
No, just you know, the UN one I could almost make sense of. But the BBC one, no. But when you click through, it is a little bit more like Esther said.
They don't have a fun
pockets
job,
of support in
On
Iran.
the Hamas one, they obviously failed because Hamas is a proscribed terrorist group in the UK. Like, they wouldn't have been breaking impartiality rules to state a fact.
All right.
But in this case, obviously, I understand they have...
I'm going to introduce something different now. No, time for something completely different, as they say. In February this year, a video was shared on Instagram showing a man in New Zealand jumping from a pleasure boat into the sea, right next to an orca and its calf. The 50-year-old has been fined now $600, with investigators left genuinely stunned by the man's extremely irresponsible behaviour. We have got a clip. Apparently some viewers might find this upsetting. And let's just play that again for everyone. So basically, they're on a pleasure boat. There's an orca, killer whale, with its calf next to it, and this idiot, presumably after a few beers, decides that he wants to go and join it for a cuddle and a swim.
And what is
I mean, he's lucky to be alive.
He is very lucky to be alive.
Lucky to be alive. Anyway, right, so it's time now to bring you today's greatest Bristol Union jackass. Esther, who is your greatest Briton?
Oh, it has to be Craig McKinley.
Yeah.
It has to be. When I actually saw that interview earlier on, his spirits are so uplifting. You know, going through what he went through, I mean, basically being, I think, all his limbs amputated and still wanting to be an MP and even rebranding himself as the bionic MP. I think that's really...
We've got a clip. We've got a clip.
Everything was starting to shut down. It was quite serious, and the wife was told that they'd very rarely see people of this amount of illness in the hospital and perhaps prepare for the worst. Maybe they could have saved a bit of a foot, but my surgeon said, you are better off having them off because you can have prosthetics and you'll walk far better than having a part.
Yeah, brave man, brave man. Jonathan, who's your greatest Briton?
Well, obviously D-Day remembrance is coming up, so all our amazing D-Day veterans, including my great-great-uncle, Alan Gullis, who's still alive today and will be 100 this year and was, in fact, a veteran of D-Day himself and recently got his Legion of Honour when they all were out there. So, yes, to remember our heroes.
Amy?
I've picked what I think is a real reminder of how horrendous the infected blood scandal really is. Is a 7-year-old boy who lost his life when he was haemophiliac. He had the blood transfusion, which he contracted the AIDS virus, and he died when he was just 7 years old.
Oh, poor lad.
And I think it just reminds you of...
Yeah, it does. That's horrific. Look, to be honest, let's be, every single one of them could win. It's gone to Craig McKinley MP. Again, I'll just say, you can watch that documentary with Christopher Hope, our political editor, watch it online, etc. But an incredibly worthy winner, as all of them would have been. Right, let's rattle through the Union jackasses. So go on.
The guy who jumped, the New Zealand man who jumped on that whale, that's quite horrifying, actually.
Yeah, ridiculous. Be fined 600 quid. He's lucky to be alive. Anyway, go on, Jonathan.
The BBC. You know why.
All right.
On the Union jackass every week.
Yeah.
It's a theme. If there's a theme, go on, Amy, who's your Union jackass?
Jeremy Hunt for using up civil service time and money to attack the Labour government. I'm not sure that's in their remit.
OK, fine. And today's Union jackass is the BBC. So for the old...
That's shocking.
For the old, mixed legacy of the Butcher of Tehran, all of that stuff. Right, well, look, I will be back again tomorrow at 9 p.m. Make sure you keep it GB News, though, because headliners are up next. And I say a massive thank you. Tonight has been a rip-roaring show. I will join you tomorrow at 9 p.m, so we do it all again. Keep fighting the good fight, people.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's going to be another cooler day on Wednesday with some very heavy and persistent rain for some of us. We do have weather warnings in force for a large swathe of the UK throughout Wednesday. That's as this weather front approaches from the south and east, wrapped around an area of low pressure through this evening. So some very heavy rain to come through this evening across the southeastern areas of England in particular. We could also see some thunderstorms for the first few hours of this evening across the west as well. But that rain will become more confined to the east coast just throughout tonight. And it will turn a little bit drier elsewhere, but there will be a lot of cloud around by tomorrow morning. So it will be another fairly mild start to the day. But some drizzly rain will start to affect parts of the east coast just as that weather front starts to approach. So the east coast of Scotland could see quite a lot of low cloud around. But the northwest of Scotland could see some brightness first thing, but that rain will arrive later on in the day. Across Northern Ireland, some showery rain, but it's not expected to be as heavy as it has been through today. But it's across parts of North Wales, the Midlands, northeastern England in particular, where the rain will be the heaviest first thing. And that will continue to persist throughout the day. So as the day goes on, I think any impacts from the rain will become more likely as more weather warnings come into force. As that rain pushes up into Scotland, we've got another weather warning in force for Scotland. We could see up to 100 millimetres, perhaps more, fall over the 24 hours between Wednesday and Thursday, particularly across parts of North Wales into northern areas of England. So that could bring some major travel disruption. And temperatures are going to be disappointing for the time of year with plenty of cloud around. Rain continues into Thursday, particularly across the north and west. It's this north area of Wales where there's the most potential for some disruptive heavy rain, but it will turn more showery as the day goes on. And across the south, it will start to turn a little bit brighter by the afternoon. A mix of showers